1992 came and you moved from Duke to become director of the Institute for Advanced Study. I remember at the time you told me that you thought it would take about a third as much time and therefore free up time for mathematics. How did that whole thing come about?
They approached me, and if I remember right, it was the initial contact was Enrico Bombieri, whom I'd known because he'd lived in our house in Shady Hill Square way back in the 60s and was, of course, a faculty member at the Institute. And to see if there was interest. And, I had felt that I had pretty much done a lot of what I was going to be able to do at Duke, and it was becoming more and more administrative. And also when you are in an institution and are seen as an agent of change, which I think probably I was, that has reactions that begin to set in and you become less able to do things.
Right.
So the first formal approach was Jim Wolfenson, who was then an investment banker, but chair of the board of the Institute, called up and wanted to come down to see me in Chapel Hill, where I live. So I went out to the airport and picked him up in his plane, which he'd flown, or his pilot had flown down. First experience with that. Drove him out to the house, and he was an amazing man. Probably the most gifted in many ways person I've gifted in the sense of having just multiple talents that I've ever come across. He was an Olympic fencer and so on. Played cello in the Carnegie Hall. After we got in the house, he completely ignored me and focused on Taffy because he understood that the issue was she had a wonderful job that she loved, and that was the issue. If they wanted to offer me a job, then getting her to agree was going to be the critical thing. He talked to her a while, and then he found out that it was the election for the Senate in North Carolina, and Jesse Helms was running against a guy named Harvey Gantt, who was the mayor of Charlotte, and the black guy.
Right, I remember that.
And Jesse Helms was running a filthy campaign. And as you know, Taffy is a Berkeley liberal, and this was just driving her nuts. So Jim got onto that, and in a very subtle way, sort of talked about that and how frustrated she was with some of her colleagues she was working with, who were sweet people, but just couldn't see the underside of what was going on. I think it would have been hard for her to leave the job she had because she loved her patients if she hadn't been so upset at this.
A very interesting case of causality that...
Right. Anyway, and then I moved to the Institute in 91.
First good thing I've heard about Jesse Helms. So. Probably my only real regret in our personal relationship is that I got an invitation to come to your installation at the Institute, and I was teaching. It would have been difficult, but I didn't come, and I apologize now because
We've made up for it.
My impression is that you managed to really have a very, comparably harmonious time there.
Yeah, I certainly, first it was an extremely enjoyable experience, and for the most part, I got along very well with everyone. There were, of course, occasional issues, and there was one that blew up in the Chronicle of Higher Education when I tried to unload a guy who had already resigned but didn't want to leave. So that was a bit of a flap. But, on the whole, it was a great experience and a wonderful board. Really interesting board. Jim Wolfenson and Friends was quite a collection of, Mike Bloomberg was on the board, Leon Levy, Dick Dilworth. I mean, it was very extraordinary. John Huntsman Jr. Mario Draghi is still on the board. and so on.
My impression was that fundraising was a significant element of your job there.
That was. And, I think there again, the people I had helping me, working with me, Rachel and Pamela, were just exceptional. The Institute for Advanced Study is really extraordinary in the professionalism of its staff. I mean, they're just the best. And, among those, Arlen Hastings, who was my executive assistant, was just exceptional. She essentially ran the place while I was director. Thorough professional in what she did. They basically would wind me up and just guide me as to what to do.
How much is the director involved with faculty appointments and things like that?
That changed while I was there. Before, it had been a process that was entirely internal to the Institute, and the director had basically no part in it. And that had had problems over the years. Mm-hmm. So the change was that there's now, when an appointment is proposed, there's a committee put together with half people outside the Institute and half inside. And they make a recommendation to the director, but the director doesn't have to accept it. So that's the process that's in place now.
And was it difficult to make that change?
It was much easier than it would have been if there had not been a big flap the year before over an appointment. And people could see that the old internal way was just designed to pit factions within the Institute against each other. And you needed some more objective outside input. And I also felt that the director, since they're responsible fiscally for the place, have to have the ability to turn back an appointment that just isn't appropriate.
So you were in the unusual position of having, earlier in your life, been offered an academic appointment at the Institute. And I think that, if I remember, you were at Harvard at that point, and I remember everyone was taking you to dinner, and then you decided to stay. But I imagine that the fact that that had happened was very helpful.
That was very helpful. I was a colleague, if you like, of the faculty.
I remember at your retirement from being director that Bob McPherson, said that at last, we've succeeded in getting you as a full-blown member of the mathematics group. It also seemed like, there were a lot of fun aspects to doing this job. I came to your daughter Becky's wedding, which was at the Institute, and where it was a Sikh wedding. Dilip arrived riding across the Institute lawn on a white horse. I presume that's the first time that's happened.
The morning of that wedding, when Dilip was riding across the Institute on the white horse, Oleg Grabar, a wonderful historian, Islamicist, had just come back from overseas and was just arriving back at the Institute, and he was jet-lagged and punchy from the trip. And he got out of the car, and here's all these Indians and a white horse and a bunch of Sikhs, and he'd just come from India. And he wondered, what in the world, where am I?
So I have a picture of you wearing a turban from that event, which, we'd always joked about you being our guru, and this was really the icing on the cake.